Today we have Barbara Waxman, and I am so excited. I even put on my first dress in 3 months because I wanted to feel like I'm thriving today. And I have to say, how you show up can influence how you feel. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. Barbara, I met. We are both instructors at the Modern Elder Academy with Chip Conley, and I had a chance to meet her through Chip, and I've just been so impressed with what she's doing around this area of Middlescence, which you'll learn more about. But it's this concept, we're living longer lives, and how do we keep thriving all through life at whatever age or stage? She's a leading authority on this. She's a passionate advocate for aging, for wisdom, for thriving, especially in midlife. And her mission is to shift the cultural norms around aging. And so she's created this quiz. Hopefully most of you have a chance to take it, called the 5 Essential Elements. We're going to talk about that. And let's see, she's written a book called The Middlescence Manifesto, Igniting the Passion of Midlife. And so anyway, we're delighted to have her join us today, and I can't wait to hear what she has to say about how we can continue to thrive. So welcome, Barbara.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for being here on a Friday morning when the world is kind of upside down. And I just want to start with a moment of recognition that we're all here and doing the best we can with what we've got. And I'm going to try to help by offering tools for each one of you that are based on research, both the art and science of a life well lived, to help not only get through these times, but make a difference also. So thank you for being here. And I want to mention again for anyone who's recently joined, if you can go on video, we don't care if you're in a bathrobe, but really being here in community is good for all of us, and not seeing just a blank square, feeling like at a time when we can't physically be together, it's nice not to have people seem like they're not present when we want the energy of the group. So thank you.
The only excuse is if you're out for a walk in the beautiful nature, you can be on your audio. Okay, Barbara, you are one of the only gerontologist coaches in the US. Can you tell us a little bit about what's a gerontologist and a little bit about how you got into this? I love your story.
Thanks for asking, because I kind of take for granted that people understand. If you remember Geritol, remember that when we were kids, there was this Geritol vitamin. And so oftentimes people think gerontologist. So a gerontologist is someone with an advanced degree in studying adult aging and wisdom, and all the aspects of the physiological, the social policy, demography. We're used to hearing about child development experts. And then we assume culturally that once we hit adulthood, whatever that means, it's changing, right? With the boomerang effect with our kids in their 20s, that once we hit adulthood, we stop developing. And it's kind of like, you're supposed to get better and better, then flatline, play some golf, travel, and then it's all over. And it's so much more rich and exciting. And I get very nerdy about that. So I am a gerontologist. I have an advanced degree in adult development and aging. But what's kind of different is a lot of people will say to me, it's so smart for you to be in this demographic area right now, because everything you read about has to do with aging. And some of you who have known me for a long time on this call know that I have been interested in aging and wisdom really since I was a child. My father was a physician in New York, and he would volunteer in nursing homes, in one in particular. And he would take me with him and let me roam the halls. What's going to happen to someone in a nursing home? So I'd roam the halls, I'd visit with people, and they'd say, what's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this? And from a young age, by the way, either I don't have the DNA or nobody told me not to listen to old people, to be scared of them. So I was getting all this positive reinforcement, and I left feeling good, because whenever any one of us makes someone's day, you just feel good. It's like a natural drug. So I had this association. And so throughout high school and then college, I studied perceptions of the elderly, trying to figure out, why do we see people so differently just because they have wrinkles or what have you? And then went on and got my graduate degree. And just the quick transition, I'm a coach. So I am one of the only master's level gerontologists and certified coaches in the country. And what was interesting about that is I did not know what I would do with a gerontology degree. And for a long time, I worked for organizations doing strategy and planning and studies. And then about 2000, about 20 years ago, people started to ask me if I would coach them. And I didn't know what coaching was. And you heard I'm originally from New York. Now I live in the Bay Area and have for a long time. And the New Yorker side of me thought, coaching? Why would a CEO need a coach? That sounds really soft. This is when coaching was just beginning. And so many people asked me that I looked into it further and realized, wow, no one who has the kind of background in adult development and leadership is also a coach. So I went back to school again and started the Odyssey group in about 2006, and have been working on leadership and coaching what I've been calling adults midlife and better ever since.
And you've also coined a word or popularized the word Middlescence. Tell us a little bit about that and what that means.
So I do have this little manifesto. It's short, it's 50 pages, it's on Amazon, and it's really making the case for why it's time that we name a particular life stage Middlescence. So many of you, everyone I'm guessing, knows the term adolescence, right? We all know that term. And the minute I say adolescence, write in the chat, what I say adolescent stage, what's it about? Write in the chat what are some words or things that come to mind during that adolescent stage? Growth.
Young.
Development. Transitional. Rapid change, questioning authority, puberty, discovery, opportunity, learning. Transition to adulthood, emotional upheaval, exploration, becoming an adult, middle school. Moody, creative, passion, raging hormones. Who am I? Learning who you are outside your parents. So thank you for those, and I see there are more coming in. Right, so we think about it as a transitional stage that can be uncomfortable with your hormones raging, etc. Now, in 1900, life expectancy was about 47. Today, it's early 80s. For people who have advanced education, don't smoke, exercise regularly, and keep their stress low, we can expect to live into our 90s unless there's some sort of accident or something coming in the way. So what's happened is we go through another stage. Let me describe it to you. We transitioned from feeling like I'm not young anymore, but I'm not old. Our hormones are changing, though this time, not necessarily in ways we like. Our bodies are changing. Our relationships, we're moody. We're feeling like we're transitioning towards something, but we don't know what. The truth is that it's like we have a second adolescence now. And just like the minute I say adolescence, you get it. And you can say, okay, I know what that child-ish is going through. I know what to expect. I know that they're going to branch out in different ways, some healthy, some not. What if we called out, if we named this stage Middlescence, a name that I didn't make up, but I am the first person to kind of define it and put a line in the sand and say, this is a life stage on its own. It's when we're adults and we're feeling like I've lived the past 20 or 30 or 40 years of adulthood and I have 20 plus years to go. What do I care about? Have I been living someone else's dream? Have I been doing what I've been doing long enough and I want to change it? Am I an empty nester and now I don't know how to get back on that treadmill of work. I don't want to go too fast on it, but I do want to be on it. So I think it's really important. You know, they say if you can name it, you can tame it. So naming Middlescence is a passion project and a commitment that I've made.
And you repotted yourself, right, in Middlescence. I think you repotted yourself in Italy for a time and then recently in India. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what inspired that and maybe what you learned or how you maybe evolved as a result.
Absolutely. Let me introduce this idea of repotting for a moment, and then I can tell you a little bit about ways in which I've explored it. So repotting is if you think of yourself as a thriving, growing plant. We're more like plants than you may think. We need sun, we need oxygen, we need nutrients to make us thrive. There comes a time where we get root bound. Now, it may be root bound in our thinking. For example, before the last presidential election, I would only listen. I was like in an echo chamber. I was listening and reading things that I agreed with because the rest of it was so upsetting to me that I couldn't believe it would happen. When the election happened, I was completely shocked and unprepared. I needed to repot my thinking and expose myself, widen the pot to points of view that I disagree with and I find upsetting. But without doing that, I feel like it's dangerous. So we can repot, that's just one example, our mindsets. It doesn't have to be a physical repotting. We can repot our habits. We can physically repot. So I have three adult kids, 30, 28, and 24. And when they were kind of in middle school, I was on a trip with my husband, who at the time would always say to me, we've got to start a business, and he'd be planning the future and go, go, go. And I remember saying to him, we have 3 kids in middle school and younger, be here now. And I just threw out this really to kind of go off of this conversation, this idea. When the kids are all gone and we're empty nesters, let's come. We were in Italy when I came up with this. I said, we'll come back here and we'll spend a year and figure out what we want to do when we grow up then. Somehow it took on a life of its own. And then we did it. We thought a gap year was wasted on kids. So we did was what seemed unmanageable. We both work full time. My husband works for a firm that said, sure, go ahead. And then when it became reality, said, you can't go. And he made it work. I just had a couple of clients. So we were both working a couple of hours a day. And it gave us the opportunity to come away from our culture, from our normal ways of being, and examine our thoughts, our habits, our relationships. And in so doing, I looked at the patterns I had seen over the past, at that time, almost 15 years of working with adults midlife and better. And I started writing a book and saw that whether people had a sudden liquidity event, meaning sold a business and had all this money and said, well, when the goal isn't making money, what do I do with my life? And other people I'd worked with who were single parents struggling to make ends meet. I took all that information and realized there are some commonalities. We all struggle in midlife. We want a greater sense of meaning, of purpose. We want to make the money we need, understanding the lifestyles we want, and to be good matriarchs and patriarchs of our families. And I recognized then that it was like another life stage. And that's when I wrote the manifesto and named Middlescence. So repotting can be physical, a move, but it can also be your mindset and habits and patterns.
Great. And we're going to talk more about the mindset when we get into the quiz in just a minute. Before we do, you've mentioned to me that you like to think of the midlife crisis as a myth.
Mm-hmm. It's not just me. Research actually bears out that there is this myth of the midlife crisis. It's kind of like, again, for adolescents, we understand it's a tumultuous period. For some kids, more than for others. We anticipate that we have to have constructs, cultural, societal, in schools, activities they can become involved with. As parents, how many books do we read about how to parent your teenager, or articles? Or we need to do the same things in midlife. So it's just become very clear that this midlife crisis idea is not a crisis. It's to be anticipated as part and parcel of that inner churning that we feel in midlife when we say, I'm at a crossroads. I don't even know what's in which direction. And that's when working with a coach, and I'm going to share one tool today. There are tools to help people establish, okay, where am I? What do I see? Because my perspective, if I unearth my wisdom and know how to use it, I know myself well, but I'm too busy and it's too tangled up to really learn, sit at the feet of my life and learn from it. So we help people do that. So the crisis is actually for the people who are affected by the change. So for example, someone decides, I have a client who decided to leave medicine and to go into volunteering for a while and then transitioning to work for a company, a lot less lucrative. It was involving a move, and her family said, what are you doing? Wait a minute. We depend on you. We have this income. We have this lifestyle. You committed years to doing this. And the answer was, I haven't been happy for a long time. I actually went down that road. I care about people, but that wasn't the path, even though it took years of study. And so she started living her truth. Her family came along, but they were more in crisis around the tumult created for them as a result of that impact, if that makes sense to you.
That's fascinating. You also mentioned, you brought up research, and I found it intriguing that when you did research with companies who enacted some of your practices of these 5 essential elements, they reported 41% lower absenteeism, 17% higher productivity, and 21% increase in profitability. And I know I coach a number of women in the workplace right now who are just at their wits' end. That, you know, they're trying to hold a full-time job. They are trying to parent. They're trying to homeschool. They're trying to keep the house clean and get dinner on the table. And really, they're at their breaking point. I would love to know what type of advice you have for them so that they can continue to show up in their companies and inspire the kinds of results that you cite in your research.
Well, there's PC pre-COVID and AC after COVID, and we're not after COVID yet. And then there's, I guess, during. Women in our culture, and I was just reading an article about women in France actually, have always, the vast majority of women carried the responsibilities of a lot of the doing at home, not the caring, not the love, but the doing. So we have multiple full-time jobs. And what's happening now is the stressors are tremendous because with kids at home and working, people can't get in front of everything they want to do. And then the anxiety and stress that starts to happen around how much time are we spending in the back of our minds worrying about our future, about our children's future, about our jobs, about putting food on the table. So I think right now in this COVID period, it is distinct from some of the research studies that quoted that information before, because we have this extra layer of stress. So believe it or not, now more than ever, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first. Self-care is not selfish. If you are depleted, are you going to have patience to both deal with what's happening at work and deal with your family? And by the way, a lot of us not only are concerned for our family, even if we have young adult children who have lost their jobs, they're not living with us necessarily, some are, but we have those concerns. And we're concerned about our parents who may live locally or across the country and we can't even see them. So It seems counterintuitive. It seems selfish, but the research pre-COVID and now, because I'm working with people all over the country, if you put on your own oxygen mask, and I don't mean spending hours a day, but I do mean making yourself a priority so that you can show up as the best possible version of yourself that you can right now. We also have to have a lot of forgiveness. People talk a lot about forgiving others and giving them a pass, and that's absolutely true. What I find to be even harder is for us to forgive ourselves when we lose our patience, when we're not totally focused, when we're not perfect in the way we want to show up for everybody. So it may be a good time to start talking about some of the energy work that the quiz covers. And if it's okay, I want to take all of us through a short exercise so that you can experience the reality that we can't see, and is sometimes hard to believe, that you can access energy for yourself and for others at any time. So we're going to do it together. I'm going to do it with you so you're not feeling like, oh, this is weird. We're going to do two things. I'll tell you what they are. We're going to do just a quick breathing exercise and then see how the energy of this group may or may not feel different. And then I'm going to do something I learned about Qigong and energy actually when I was studying with a master in Italy, because who has time to study their energy when we're working here? And we're going to do that and see what the difference is there. Before we do that, I often, when I'm leading these IRL in real life, in real time, I play music. Music, research shows, is known to get to the very soul. It's what we call a third way to access who you are. Have you ever been in your car and you're listening to a song and you love the song, but you're sort of tearing up? Anybody? Raise your hand. I can see a lot of you. Okay. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. Why is that? So I'm telling you right now, by the end of this call, I want you to think about, what is your theme song right now? Every one of us needs a theme song to boost us. Whether you play it in the morning or when you're down, you got to have a theme song. So that's one part of energy we're not going to experience today, but I want you to think about it. Okay, so let's start with breath. So for any of us sitting down, it looks like a number of us are. Put your hands in your lap, and we're going to I'll close my eyes too. Close your eyes. We're going to take 3 breaths. It's going to feel like an hour, but it's going to take probably 15 or 20 seconds. So what I'm going to want you to do is take a deep breath through your nose and feel your ribs expanding all the way, and then breathe it out through your mouth. We're going to do that 3 times. So begin. And we should hear when you breathe out. When you breathe out, feel it out all the way down to your feet. When you breathe out, feel it going out your ears. Now breathe normally with your eyes closed for a moment. Open your eyes. Write in the chat, does anything feel different? What word comes to mind? How do you feel? Calm, relaxed, strong, peaceful, refreshed, reset, happy, centered, expansive. Reboot. Oh, I like that, Diane and Patty. Calm and centered. So being on this call, you're probably not all at your most stressed moment. But I feel, now I'm very attuned to this because I've been working with people virtually for a long time. There's a difference in the energy around us. That is accessible to you at any time. Use it. And it probably felt like a long time. I didn't time us. but it probably was something like 15 seconds. The other tip is before you answer your phone, take one conscious breath. That's it. You will be present in a way that you're normally not. Okay, so that's the first one. Now that we're calm and centered, I'm going to do something with you where we're going to feel energy differently. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to rub your hands together really hard for probably 30 seconds. Put my timer on. And we have to do it so hard that your hands are going to feel really, really hot. So your hands are going to feel hot, and you're going to, when I say stop, hold them together about 2 centimeters apart. Okay, rub. It's going to feel like a long time, and hopefully you're going to rub harder, get your hands really hot. Keep rubbing. Shake your head if your hands are feeling a little bit hotter. Yes? I'm not going to let you stop till I see yeses. All right, harder. Keep going. We have 10 more seconds. Okay, my hands are getting really hot. Okay, now hold your hands 2 centimeters apart. Now pull them 4 centimeters and a little more. Anyone feel anything gluey or vibrating between your hands? Shake your head if you do. Yeah. Okay, so now pull your hands together. Don't touch again. Do you feel some warmth? There's something almost magnetic between our hands. It's a little more advanced, but you can kind of make a ball. This literally is universal energy. And Qigong, the study of Qigong, is about understanding. By the way, this is the only thing I took away. I failed miserably at being able to do this. So I was trying too hard. But this energy is actually what, you can put your hands down, actually what exists. And again, if you are feeling exhausted or not centered, if you breathe and do this, you are capturing kind of the energy that exists around you. And you'll see, I want to be able to go through the quiz, but it is another kind of energy. So music, breathing, and this kinetic energy that exists are all accessible to you, and other kinds. But I just wanted you to experience that so you'd get a little sense of it today.
So I totally subscribe to the breathing and the music. I worked with a coach around some of the public speaking engagements I'm doing, and him telling me, just do those deep breathing before you go on, especially when you're nervous, or if you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, or if you're triggered in any way, or the phone rings and you see who it is, you know, that breathing is so powerful. I think it's life-changing. The music too, he said, you know, when you're nervous, put on that, if you're driving to something, put on that theme song, that psych up song. And I do that all the time. And music is on in my house morning and night, and it's jazz in the morning and it's other music at night. I haven't done the energy thing like that though, the rubbing. So how does one access that? Is that you just do that exercise?
You do that, and then the easiest thing, the most accessible, because it takes real training and you can go online and study Qigong, but yoga actually is another way to really capture your breathing and your physical energy and your mindset. So there are a lot of online yoga options right now. The other thing is to meditate daily, and we may get into this when we go through the quiz. We're used to thinking about, oh, I've got to work out, I've got to go to the gym, I've got to do my exercise, I've got to go for a walk. But we're not in the business of being out and about and being in the physical work business. We're in the intellectual property brain business. What are we doing to refine and work out our brains so they are clear, focused, energized, and strong? We don't take the time because we feel like, oh, that's meditation. Maybe it's not for me, or it feels like self-care. I don't have time for that. But we recognize that working on our physical bodies when we're not in the business, most of us, maybe some of us, of physical work. So we have to question some of our assumptions. And if you are trying to be the best you can be, focused, strong, powerful, knowledgeable, this idea of senior moments is BS. I mean, yes, the older we get, the more information we have. So it takes some more time to go through the mental filing cabinets. It gets quicker the more you meditate because you get rid of the noise in your system. So that is another way to access your kind of mental and emotional energy: yoga, breathing, and meditation. Yeah.
So Barbara, I think a lot of us intellectually know these are the right things to do, but for some reason they are the first things to fall off the task list in the day, or they might be scheduled and they don't happen. Do you have any practical advice for ensuring that we do make these happen each day?
Two things that I'll just mention now. One is find an accountability partner. I mean, sometimes people have a coach as an accountability partner, but you don't need a coach to have someone ask you every day, did you do what you committed to yourself? And don't overcommit to yourself. Do what is realistic. So find an accountability partner is number one. Number two, we're going to go through the quiz. There's also an activation guide. And the activation guide breaks down each of the 5 areas of the quiz, and it takes you through a more specific retooling of how you can activate those areas so they become habits. It takes about 3 weeks to 4 weeks to create a new habit. So for some of us who exercise regularly, if we don't, it feels like something's missing and we feel uncomfortable. For people who don't exercise, it feels like, how does anyone make time for it? It becomes a habit and a ritual. So I would say go on my website and you can access the activation guide to the Thriving Quiz as another tool.
Great. On the accountability, I just finished a 21-day meditation with a group, and it was with Eckhart Tolle. And each day, everyone who was on it just said, day 1, done. Day 2, done. And that was our accountability. So it can be quite simple. We have a few questions, and then I do want to get into the quiz and some of the results. For one set of questions, people said, what are some ideas for theme songs? So I would suggest, Barbara, what is your theme song? Do you have a energy song?
I do, and mine changed. There are a lot of Italian songs ever since Italy. Yeah, they're in Italian, so they're not popular songs here, but they bring me back. So what I do is I hear a song, and in addition, I collected in my mind a specific place with a view from, we lived in 6 months. So you could do this from your garden, from whatever you love. So associate the song with this place that gets you right where you want to be. And then you take it on the road, whether you're going for an interview or you're making a networking call, which frightens so many people. Yeah.
Great advice. If you want to share your song in the chat, feel free to do so. It looks like people might want some inspiration there. Also, any practical advice for building mental sharpness?
Well, meditation is number one. I mean, even when I meditate, you'd think, oh, she's a coach, she must have some incredible meditation practice. I do it 10 or 15 minutes a day. That's it. And when I do it consistently, it makes a huge difference in my staying sharp. That's number one. Number two, we're used to hearing about crossword puzzles, and those things are all good. But really what keeps us sharp is like working out. When you go to the gym, you want to be a little bit uncomfortable. You want to be a little sore, so you move forward. Similarly, learning a new language, something that gets you kind of frustrated and maybe tired, a new skill. So this is a great time to take online classes and to learn new things. I mean, I just started a 21-day racial equity challenge to question my own assumptions, to learn some new ways of communicating, of understanding and communicating with people. So believe it or not, when you learn more, it's actually a way to keep your thinking sharper.
I bet a number of us, because I'm also trying to read and understand as much as I can right now about justice and inequity. What is this 21-day challenge that you mentioned? Is it something we can access?
Yes, and I can send it to you. It's out of Michigan, but I have to look up the exact name.
Maybe you could send it and I'll include it in the recording that I'll send out after this, so that if others are interested.
The other thing I just will make a note about staying mentally sharp is sleep. You can't fake it till you make it. A lot of people say, oh, I need less than 6 hours of sleep, or about 6 hours. Less than 2%, fewer than 2 out of every 100 people need 6 hours or less of sleep. If you don't sleep, you're not going to be sharp. So that's another kind of baseline thing that's really important.
Sleep is a challenge, even if you know it's important. Sometimes some of us in Middlescence have a harder time sleeping, but we'll save that for another conversation. One last question, and then we're going to get into the quiz. Somebody asked, with this constant media, there's so much negative news right now. Anxiety's up, depression's up. How does one stay, energized, positive? I know for me, it's really limiting my media consumption. It's not being on social media. It's knowing just enough to get by, but not immersing myself. What suggestions do you have for others who might be in that same spot?
Yeah, what you just said is foundational. I have been working with all my clients saying, put yourself on a news diet. Don't worry about the other diet yet. COVID is like, have you gained the COVID-19? But a news diet is actually a really important thing. It doesn't take all day or checking every hour to understand what's happening. We have a natural tendency to want to check it. And in fact, there's all kinds of new research about how staying online, checking your Instagram, your news feed, your Facebook, all these different social media ways that we imbibe information becomes more than a habit. It becomes like an obsession that we don't even realize, like Pavlov, or we hear the ping on our phone and it makes us uncomfortable. So I would turn off your notifications unless you absolutely need it. That's number one. I would create rules for yourself and your family about how often you probably know, how often do I need to check the news to stay informed enough? And at what time of day do I want to be doing that? So for example, I don't listen to the news at night before I go to bed. Because like you were saying, Diane, I have enough trouble sleeping at my stage that I choose not to do that. I also have found that I don't need as constant a barrage of the information as I had in the beginning of COVID. So protecting yourself from too much news and too much, not even just news, too much time on your device. We need more time together. When we're having family meals, we don't have a phone at the table. When I take a walk, I turn off my notifications. So that's one thing. The other has to do with, if we're letting go with this idea that we have to know everything going on, what are we left with? We're left with wanting to understand ourselves better. Who am I and what does this mean during COVID? How is it changing me? Who am I and what does this mean during this time where civil rights, equal rights, all the isms are coming to the fore? What do I want to learn? So hence I put myself on this 21-day equity challenge. And then stop reading so many articles about it. Choose what you want to put the track you want, and then do something. A lot of times I'll talk with people, I'll say, what you need to do is undo more. But in this case, we're so used to taking information in now because we're frightened. And so we want to make sure we know everything. But I think we're shifting. I think the time is shifting towards where we're going to say, what can I do? Some things you can do are get out the vote. We're going to need that for the election. Some things you could do are research organizations who are doing good work and donate to them. The money that we're not spending on all kinds of things going out could be put to good use. get involved in some way. So I go from over-imbibing information to being self-aware, activating what we need to learn, and then doing something with it.
That's great advice. Wonderful advice. Okay, do you think it's time to launch our poll for those who've taken the quiz?
Yes.
Let's get into it. Okay, I'm going to launch this. And if you've taken the quiz, please let us know how you did. And then we're going to walk through some of the different responses. And I will share the results.
But we're not going to call anyone out, so don't worry.
Right. This is totally anonymous. We can't see who is thriving and who's depleted. So please be honest. And also, as we get into our remaining 15 minutes together, please use the chat room if you have specific questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Okay, we have roughly half of the people voting. So I'm going to end it because I think it's reflective probably, and I'm going to share the results. So there we go. A lot of blahs, Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of thrivers, sputtering and depleted. What do you have to tell us about this?
Well, I've been doing a lot of webinars and Zoom calls since COVID started. And what's been so interesting to me is in the beginning, I thought that what we would see would be everyone depleted, sputtering, blah. But what I think is actually quite interesting, and now we're adding the whole protests and what's happening in the world with race and the conversations that are coming to the fore and the injustice. Oh, can you put the poll back up for a moment?
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Is that we're all going through this challenging time. I don't think one person on this call would say, are you kidding? This is an easy time. And yet some of us are thriving and some of us are nearly thriving. So one of the things I want to say is mindset is everything. You know, we can be looking at the same situation and our circumstances are different and they're distinct. Yet the same reality is absorbed in different ways. So consciously make choices that will help you move up toward that thriving. So it doesn't surprise me, actually. It did a couple of months ago what results like this look like. I'm not surprised that so many people are in the blah zone. We're sort of feeling stuck and like there's one thing after another. You know, if it wasn't COVID and then it wasn't the economy and it wasn't the protests and it wasn't job insecurity, what could be next? So more than ever, all you can do is control how you show up and what is part and parcel of giving you any sort of mojo right now. And that's what these elements of the quiz do.
Yeah, I mean, part of me, the blah, I think is related to not having much to look forward to. You know, that there's no travel. We don't know when we can eat out again. Here in California, you can't even get a haircut, hardly. In some counties you can, but it's just excitement for the future when you don't know what the future holds.
Right.
The other thing I would love to explore with you a little bit is this mindset. And I know for me, I've read that you can't be anxious and gracious at the same time. And so I try to resort to a gratitude journal. And when I'm feeling any anxiety, I just stop and I start to list everything I'm grateful for. That's my approach to mindset. What suggestions do you have for people who maybe are having trouble with that growth mindset or that positive mindset?
The first thing I think you talked with this group and all your groups a lot about, which is the difference between having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And just really quickly, for those of you who aren't familiar, a fixed mindset is, I'm kind of fully baked. You know, how much can I change at this point? I have made decisions in my life that I've got to stick with because I'm too far in. It would impact too many people. That's a fixed mindset. That's just one example of a fixed mindset. The growth mindset that Diane is referring to has to do with, I'm developing. You know, I can't tell you as a coach how many people say to me, and they're running companies or running movements, Barbara, my dirty little secret is I don't know exactly what I want to do when I'm a grown up, even though I am a grown up already. So I think now more than ever, ways to cultivate mindset is super important, and understanding you're not fully baked. Like at 57, I feel like I'm just getting going. I'm learning, I'm making mistakes every day. So how do we do that in this time? In terms of the gratitude, it can work, a practice of when I'm feeling stressed, I'm going to write down what I'm grateful for. What I found with my clients is when they've done that, they kind of are in a mood where they're dismissing what they're grateful for. They either feel guilty for it. Anyone ever feel guilty for not suffering as much as others right now? Raise your hand if that's the case. Yeah. So what I like to do is in the morning, before we get out of bed, think about 3 things you're grateful for. Now, the best thing is to write it, because there's this kinesthetic thing that happens and it really gets ingrained more. But do what you're going to actually do. If you have a journal by your bed, write it. But before you get out of bed in the morning, think, what are 3 things, tiny? I mean, for me this morning, one of them is that I am going to be out in the garden today because it's not going to be too hot. I'm so grateful for that. Tiny things and big things. Then at the end of the day, before you're going to bed, without judgment, think, how'd it go today? What worked? What didn't work? And find your kind of sense of equanimity. By the way, midway during the day, you got to meditate so you can get to that equanimity. But I think that is part and parcel one way to activate, starting with gratitude, meditating 15 or 20 minutes during the day, and closing out without judgment and just saying, here's what it is today. That makes sense?
This concept of comparative suffering, I'm not suffering as much as, and that can bring about guilt or shame. I would direct you to Brene Brown, has a terrific podcast on that. She has a bunch of people that she's interviewed around this concept of comparative suffering and how that's really not a helpful exercise to compare your suffering to other people. So I found that pretty informative. There's a question in chat about how do you maintain a growth mindset, especially if many of the individuals on this call are interested in resuming work or re-entering the workplace. They may be like you and I, 57 or thereabouts, and ageism is a factor. And especially right now, I have one of those out of work people under my roof, and she's getting a lot of calls that I'm not sure, it's as easy for people our age to compete in this current job market. So how do you suggest maintaining a growth mindset if you're in that position?
There are a couple things. One, just this morning I read, I mentioned to Diane and Patty earlier before we started the call that in Harvard Business Review, there was this article, this piece about how in the healthcare sector, they can't get enough Middlescence coming back into the workforce who they'll give short-term training to, because in the healthcare sector, we need all kinds of people. People are being called up who are working or were working in STEM kind of jobs to do old school coding, because some of the hospital systems in the healthcare business are so old school that kids, millennials, people who are up to date on everything digital don't know how to do that stuff. So there are actually some interesting dynamic opportunities that are presenting themselves. What organizations are also finding out, and this has to do with your mindset, and you're believing this, is that the healthiest, most productive, most financially successful companies, like any family, has a good sense of relationship and collaboration amongst the generations. We've got digital prowess from our millennials, and we've got experience, wisdom, strategy, and know-how in a different way from Middlescence. Going in to talk to companies, it's really important that you can speak to intergeneral collaboration and how you can add to their workplace, to that kind of whatever the opportunity is. Think about some constructive ways that your experience is needed to help some problem that they've got. So part of your mindset is seeing yourself as a team member and a problem solver on an intergenerational team. Is that
great advice? And we also really talk up, you have probably highly honed communication skills. you didn't grow up as a digital native, and I think there's some benefits there. There's pattern recognition that comes with experience and age. And I'd also say, look for the right culture. There's lots of places that are hiring our women. Sometimes they are universities. At Stanford right here hires a lot of our women. They value your experience and your age and wisdom. Every Thursday, we have a newsletter that goes out. So if you're not on our mailing list, sign up for that. We include our job board, which is companies largely that have come to us and want to hire you. Right now, we are promoting a returnship that Facebook is offering for women and men, but primarily women who apply, returning to the workplace. So this is something you can check out. And then we also have a number of articles that we link to about who is hiring right now and who might benefit from what you have to offer. So it may be hard, and maybe harder today than maybe even 3 months ago, but it is not impossible. And it does require using your network. So make sure to keep your network alive and schedule those coffees, whether they're Zoom or in person, and just keep putting yourself out there.
I just add one thing, since we're not going to have time to go through each of the 5 essential elements. Can I just say a little piece for a minute so people can use the quiz? I mean, we developed the quiz over the past decade, and it's based on high performance athletes, high performance corporate athletes. So it's based on the essential 25 questions that you need to answer as middlescents. So particularly for this life stage, to get kind of yourself in game shape for whatever the life is that you want to lead. Your leadership at home, your leadership at work. Foundationally, it starts with exercise and nutrition. And you'll see that there are only 5 questions. One of them has to do with body image. And Diane, it speaks to what we're talking about with mindset. Working on your sense of self is as important as knowing what foods to eat and do that. So foundationally, it's exercise and nutrition. And then we look at rest and renewal separately, because it is its own area. If you want to get away from feeling like you've seen your moments, if you want to feel powerful and that your ideas are heard, a lot of us feel like when we speak up, we're not often heard. One way to do that is to be powerful in yourself and have something to say where you're stretching yourself, you're taking risks. Rest and renewal will help you get there. Focus and growth has to do, you've got to be able to answer those questions in order to be present and to show up in the way you want to, whether you want to get back into the workforce or just take on more of a leadership role in your life. And then joy and passion, I don't call it purpose, because I feel like we have a national obsession with this idea of purpose. And the minute people hear about purpose, they think, I'm not Mother Teresa, I can't do that. Start with what I call little p purpose. Do something that brings you joy. From my garden, I bring things to neighbors. That's purposeful. That gives meaning to my life in some small way. What can you do, one thing, to make someone else's day better? So engaging in pursuits that bring you joy and satisfaction. And one of the things that people do not check off, which is essential, is this question: I allocate my time and energy in ways that reflect my values. So know what it is you stand for, and then measure yourself up, find an accountability partner to make sure, especially right now, that you are living up to your best version of yourself to the extent that you can. Time and effort, there is no such thing as time management. All we have is the ability to use our energy and focus in the time available. So answering those questions helps flip that. So I just wanted to briefly explain what the 5 elements are, and then go online, get the activation guide, find an accountability partner, reach out to me if you have questions. And I hope this has been, what time is it? We have 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes to go. In our remaining 2 minutes, what is the area of those 5 that you find people in middlescence struggle the most with?
It totally varies. Interesting, it geographically varies some, right? I guess if I had to choose, people will say exercise and nutrition, rest and renewal. I don't do as much, but I know what I need to do. Focus and growth and joy and passion and time and effort surprises people.
Interesting. In our last minute, perhaps you could tell people how they can find your quiz. I'm going to send out the quiz, the recording, and the 21-day equity challenge in an email afterwards. So I'll repost the quiz for those of you who missed it. But if they want to follow you, Barbara, can you tell us where to find you?
Let's go to barbarawaxman.com. So it's just my name, barbarawaxman.com. And you'll see on the homepage, 5 to Thrive quiz. And I think you can download the quiz without putting in your email and to get the activation guide you put in your email. And then there's more information about Middlescence and and about coaching and all kinds of good stuff like that. So that's all.
And Barbara is a frequent guest on the podcast circuit. And so you can follow her and hear more about what Barbara has to say on living your best life. And I'm so grateful, Barbara, for you. You're up top of my gratitude list today for taking your precious and valuable time to share your wisdom with all of us. So thank you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day and weekend. And stay safe, and we'll see you hopefully soon on another either workshop or coffee. So thank you, everyone.
Have a good day and weekend, everybody.